Hello, you're listening to WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. This is the Going Solo with Cece show. I am your host, Cece Shatz. I'm the Doyenne of relationship building, and I'm really so very pleased to be here with you. But before we start, we want to tell you about our website, which is goingsolonetwork.com. All of our wonderful hosts and guests are on there, so check it out. We hope that you do, because we work very, very hard to bring you all the great shows we hope that will change your life, one talk show at a time. So we've got our guest right here with us today, and I am so very pleased to have her. Hello there, Angela. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Oh, it is great to having you. We have Angela Saraba. Am I saying it
Sarabia.
right? Saraba.
Sarabia.
Sarabia. You know what? We went through it on the before the show, and I always mess it up because I get stressed out over it. Sarabia. So anyhow, we have her, and she's an attorney here, actually local in my area. So I'm really quite pleased to be able to meet her here today. Isn't it funny how you live so close, but then you don't actually meet each other until something crosses your path, and you do. And today we're going to talk about a really difficult subject. We're going to talk about domestic violence. We're going to talk about navigating two legal systems when divorce involves domestic violence. And Angela, we want to thank you so much for being on the show, because this is a tough subject, but you've spent most of your career prosecuting crimes, especially violent crimes against women. While you were a prosecutor, Angela, you won awards from two local domestic violence organizations, the Sunrise of Pasco County and the Salvation Army Domestic Violence Program. So we want to thank you for your service to everyone. It's just amazing what you have done in your career. And then we're going to talk about the latter part, some kind of fun stuff, right? Where you wrote a play, and where that's going. So we're going to cover everything in today's show. But I want to first start with, why did you decide that you wanted to do and help women in domestic violence?
I shadowed a prosecutor when I was in high school, and I just saw her at work. She handled the domestic cases, but she handled everything, and she was really amazing. And I thought, this is what I want to do. So when I went to school, I majored in criminology at UF, and I took a class while in undergrad called Intimate Partner Violence, and it was about all the dynamics involved in domestic violence. And I remember thinking, gosh, this is such a tough, intractable issue. I really want to tackle it. So when I got to law school, they offered this internship where you could go into a domestic violence unit that's specialized in just those types of cases, and handled, everything from minor cases to major cases. And it was just such interesting, fascinating, complicated work. And my hope was, when I get out of law school, I hope I get to do this as a career. So I got out of law school. I took a job with a law firm for a while, but eventually I went into prosecution, which is what I really wanted to do, and jumped in with both feet. And it was hard work, challenging work, but really very rewarding.
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, I think it's so tough. Like we said at the beginning of the show, it's a very tough subject, but it's one that is so needed, because and even though I know that you help a lot of women, but there are men out there that are also
Absolutely.
experiencing domestic violence. So we don't want to be one-sided here. We want to make sure that we cover that, because some people are shocked when they hear it, thinking that men, would have to experience that. But believe it or not, they do. So they do experience domestic violence. So tell us a little bit about, when we say we're navigating two legal systems, what does that mean?
Well, so most people, many people are familiar with divorce cases, either because they themselves have gone through it, or they have a close friend or family member who have. And all divorces occur in our civil legal system. And in the civil legal system, it's all the cases that involve one private individual suing another private individual. So that's really all a divorce case is it's a lawsuit. One person is suing for divorce, the other person's responding, and the judge is kind of a mediator between two parties, and moving towards separating all of the financial assets and managing the children and how they're going to be situated. But when if there's domestic violence involved and law enforcement comes out and someone gets arrested, you're now in a completely separate system, and it's the criminal system. It operates differently. it has different laws, and it's no longer a case between two individuals. It's a case between the government and a person who has broken the government's laws. So one of the first things I would do as a prosecutor when a victim would come in to talk to me, oftentimes she would say, look, I've thought about it, I've prayed over it, and I don't want to go forward. I'd like to drop it. And a lot of times I'd explain to her, well, ma'am, you're now in my system. You're in the criminal system. I represent the state of Florida, and we're not dropping it. We wanted to go forward because the peace has been broken here. The laws have been violated. Even if you don't want to see anything bad happen to the offender, because now either you've forgiven him or you might decide you want to get back together with him, we as a society need to be made whole through the offender being made to answer for what he's done to you. And that may mean if it's a first offense, maybe he has to attend some mandatory counseling, to go to some mandatory alcohol treatment, do some other things. Or if he's a repeat offender, he may have to spend some time in jail, even if you don't want to see him go, because it's no longer about purely what you want. This is a case between the government and this individual who's broken our laws.
That's so difficult because we ask ourselves, why on earth would someone want to cancel it, right? Why would someone, if someone has been, violated, however, why would they want to continue on with the relationship? But the emotional side of it, it's like this attachment, right? And it's so difficult for them to break away. They're fearful of their future. They're, maybe they were the breadwinner, the person that abused them or whatever, and they're just so fearful. So they will go and say, I'll give them another chance. I'll give them another chance, hoping that whatever happened in the legal system will scare them enough, right, to be able to change that. And so how often do you see that happening when individuals, they decide to let them come back, and then do you know how often they repeat again?
I don't know the exact statistics. It's two things. One is how many of the cases does the victim no longer want to go forward with the cases, and how often do they repeat? So the first part, how often is it that the victim wants to drop the charges? Nobody wants to hear this, but it's the vast majority of the cases. So it is I could count, once a month I would have a case where a victim came in and she was ready to proceed. She was ready to see this offender go through the process, and she was ready to leave. Oftentimes a victim has to leave 7 times before she leaves for good. And the second question, how often does it repeat? Almost always. And the reason for that is the cycle of violence. These offenders, the batterers, whether they be male or female, they're in this process where we all have to deal with the fact that we have no control over our circumstances. Everybody finds a way to deal with it. Some of us find our acceptance, find our serenity, find our peace, but these offenders feel a sense of control when they can get control over their loved one. So they're on this cycle, and it's not going to stop, because this is how they grapple with the fact that they have no control ultimately over the direction of their lives. So the batterer will commit violence. Then there'll be this calm phase. There'll be a honeymoon phase where he or she will say that they're sorry and that it's never going to happen again. And that honeymoon phase can last for a while, but then eventually there's some tension rising and the cycle starts again. Because that cycle repeats itself, but the whole time the offender's saying, look, you caused this, you upset me, you're the cause. If you just do this right or you do that right, it won't happen again. The victim loves the offender in many cases, loves or wants to feel that safety and security. So she takes it on herself to try to keep the peace. She tries to figure out what she can do to keep the violence from happening. And so she's already in a losing battle, because the violence occurs because of him, not because of her, because of the batterer, not because of the victim. So she's already not going to succeed. And when the violence happens again, she just feels stuck. So a lot of times we're coming at it from a place of feeling safe and feeling whole. We feel like if violence occurred with us, we would never allow it. So we can't understand why the victim behaves the way that we do. But I actually think we can all relate to being in a relationship for too long. I mean, every one of us has sat in a relationship, put up with things we should not have had to put up with, and stayed with the relationship much longer than we should have. And there could be a million reasons for that. Maybe our family likes our significant other, maybe the kids, we don't want to see, we want the kids to have the significant other in our lives. Could be finances. It's hard to disentangle those things. Who gets the dog? Who's going to live where? And all those things are still at play when there's violence going on. And if you talk to a survivor of violence, they will almost always tell you that the violence, the physical stuff, the bruises, that was not the worst part. It was the emotional abuse. It is being put down all the time, feeling worthless. And as counterintuitive as this is, the violence doesn't push us away. The violence makes us feel more worthless, so that we start to feel like, we're not worth anything. And if this person isn't in our lives, then we're going to be alone. And sometimes victims are codependent. So they find their value in being approved of by their batterer and being trying to make themselves seem worthy to their batterer. And all of that really complex dynamic is at play. So it's not purely as simple as, well, he's hit me, so I'm just going to walk out the door.
Yeah, many people think that, and it's truly, especially if they've been married, they have children, they've got time, and there was a period of maybe when it was really good, and so you kind of
Yes.
keep going back to that. Oh, it was good, it'll be good again. If I just do this, it'll be good again.
Well, if you think about like how oftentimes we have sat maybe after a fight or disagreement in our own relationships, we think, I don't like this about him, but I got to take the good with the bad. I mean, we often love so much about our significant other, but there are things that we don't love. And we think, well, gee, if I could just get this part of him, maybe he's late to everything. If I could just get rid of that part of him, I like the rest. So you don't always want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. And as crazy as it can seem with the violence, is much the same way. Those are things we can all relate to. Some things that are pretty extreme, but are at play for many domestic violence, real domestic violence cases. The batterer may have said to her, if you leave me, I will find you. If you go, it will be worse for you. And some of them mean it. I was telling the story, I've told it several times. I can remember the first time I was at UF working in the internship in the domestic violence unit, learning, working, loving it. And I come in one day and everyone's quiet. Everyone's whispering. And I'm looking around like, what happened? And one of the victims that we had been working with was murdered. And it happens in every domestic violence unit in the country. I mean, they don't all make it. So sometimes a victim is in great fear that if she leaves, that she might be murdered. And sometimes they are. There's a lot of resources for victims out there. Every county has a shelter and with an outreach organization. And I would often tell the victim that if they're concerned for their safety, they need to call that organization and get to that shelter. They're often very secure. They have a relationship with law enforcement. Their confidential location, so no one knew where they were. Even I, as a prosecutor, did not know the shelter's location. And the victims could go to those places for safety. And that kind of security was necessary for some of these cases where maybe if the victim leaves, she knows that her batterer will start to stalk and will start to follow and will start to harass. So it's not always as simple as leaving and this other person's just going to accept that. Sometimes they don't.
Right. Now, do you know, and this might be out of your realm, but do you know if those shelters, like if they would call and they didn't have transportation, would that be arranged for her to be able to be transported and be safe?
Every shelter is different and every shelter runs differently, but most have transportation. So it's a simple matter. They all have a 1-800 number. And usually it's not purely a shelter. It's a domestic violence organization. I think there's a 1-800 number. Maybe we can put at the end that, oh, maybe you've got it there. That victims can call. So you call that and they'll route you to your local shelter. That shelter will have a toll-free number and an outreach organization. So sometimes they don't just provide transportation, but they provide all kinds of services while you are there. It may be transportation to get the kids to school. It may be somebody to help and assist with the domestic violence injunction, the restraining order. It may be counseling. Every county is different, but some are really well-funded operations that have a lot of services there for victims. So I highly encourage a victim who's truly concerned for her safety to think about availing herself of that support. One thing we haven't talked about is how much victims can get isolated. That's what oftentimes keeps them from leaving is the batterer has not allowed them contact with family and friends, or because most oftentimes anyone who cares about the victim doesn't like the batterer, that the violence has been isolating. People have stopped talking to her. They've stopped calling her because they wish she would leave this person. So she finds herself alone. So that domestic violence organization is automatic support, instant support. And oftentimes, because the victim's isolated, it's support that they sorely need. And maybe the batterer hasn't allowed her to have any credit cards or money or a job. So she truly has no way to truly leave the house. And that's where these organizations can provide transportation to a shelter and start to get her back on her feet.
Oh, that's great news. I tell you, it's such a sad thing. So let's talk a little bit about the divorce aspect. If you're divorcing someone that, has done domestic violence on you, it's very difficult, you and your kids or whether your family. So what is the procedure for, and I think we probably have to look at divorce a little bit differently, don't we?
Yes. So the procedure would be if there's truly violence going on, that you want to go with safety first. So your first phone call, if a violent incident has just occurred, is to call law enforcement right away. They'll come out, they'll take photos of injuries, they'll take photos of the residents. Oftentimes, batterers will damage other things in the residence. Then the law enforcement officers know they know the number of the shelter, they know how to get you there. They'll remove the batterer from the situation so that the victim has time to gather her belongings and get her things together. Once all that is straightened out, the offender is taken to jail. The offender is held in jail without bond, no way to get out until the morning. Prevents the situation of a batterer immediately paying bail money, getting out, and murdering the victim. Because oftentimes it's men, but he sits there while she gets to a place of safety. Then he most likely, unless it's a really severe case, he'll be able to get together some money to pay for bond. He may be released on his own recognizance and just told to come back if it's a minor case. He'll be out, but then he will have to attend to court hearings. Every court hearing that happens, a victim will get a paper in the mail notifying her. As long as she keeps her address current with the state attorney's office, she'll get noticed and get information for each court hearing. Oftentimes, I would tell victims that when they get those notices, they should call and ask, do I need to be there? Every court hearing the victim is allowed to attend, but some are not required the victim to attend. So we don't want her to have to go down there and miss work for every single one. It's oftentimes a good idea to call. The very first court date is called an arraignment. That's where the offender's told that they're charged with a crime and what they're charged with. Most oftentimes, they're going to plead not guilty at that arraignment, because if they plead guilty, it's time for sentencing. Some batterers know they're going to plead guilty, but they're not ready to get sentenced yet. They want to talk to an attorney. So a lot of times I'd have a victim burst into tears on me at the arraignment. Why is he saying he's not guilty? How can he say he didn't do this? And I would just be explaining, well, they're just pleading not guilty because they're not ready to get sentenced yet. But then there'll be all kinds of pretrial hearings, figuring out the status of the case. Most cases will be worked out with a plea bargain. The state attorney's office will, for first-time offenses, just want the batterer to attend some classes to go on probation. The victim may have some things that she'd like to see, and a prosecutor will want to hear about that. Like maybe she wants him to get some counseling for drug addiction or alcohol dependency. Some of those things can be worked in. So I would also say, talk to your prosecutor about what you'd like to see happen. And then eventually the case is concluded. The divorce happens after the law enforcement's called, after the victim's at a place of safety. Let's say she knows this is not manageable and she's not going to want to be married to this person anymore and she wants her divorce. Then she initiates that case, and it's at that case that all the finances get separated. The house, the cars, the kids, the dog, it all gets separated. And what can be confusing is that the divorce court will order that certain things take place. And sometimes, because they're in two separate systems, the divorce court will order to something that conflicts with the criminal case. For example, the criminal case, the judge is most likely going to want no contact to be had between the victim and the offender, because the court doesn't want the offender trying to intimidate the victim. So that order is going to be issued. But in the divorce case, if the divorce judge doesn't realize that there was domestic violence and is not aware of the criminal case, that judge may order the parties to negotiate and mediate and talk. So you've got to kind of, maybe if you've got an attorney, make your attorneys aware of each case so everybody knows what's going on. But the divorce case will proceed with all those hearings, rarely goes to trial, usually will culminate in an agreement which will be accepted by the judge, and then the parties will get divorced. Further complicating everything is that many victims who are truly in fear will need to get a restraining order. That's another court case, and that's going to be in civil court, much like a divorce. And in that arena, a victim is suing to force the batterer to do or not do something. So in the case of a restraining order, it's to not come to places she frequents, like her work, like the kids' school, like her church. Once she gets that restraining order, it allows law enforcement to pick up the defendant if they're seen in the vicinity of some of these locations. And it doesn't require the victim to sit there and wait until the defendant does something criminal before he gets picked up. So those are enormously helpful. And they also signal to each and every court that violence is going on and that the victim is serious about leaving. Many jurisdictions are finding out how hard it is on victims to have all these different things going on. So many are trying to create unified courts that are called family courts that handle a lot of these things together. But it's been spotty. So it just depends on what's going on in your particular jurisdiction.
Yeah, that could be very, very difficult. I could see. And also extremely, I would think, time consuming, because you're having to go back and forth between these different courts and everything. So that makes it even harder for families, because if she has to be, or he has to be in an in a safe house or in some place to be able to be secure, then it goes on for a long time. And when you're talking about then just like going someplace, shutting the door and being safe, and all your assets and everything you own are really out there for someone else to do whatever. Meantime, how do you pay for all this? I mean, what happens to people that are trying to work and they have to be in a safe place? I mean, how does this work?
I can answer that. So every organization is different, every domestic violence organization, but many of them have people volunteering coming in-house to help out. So they may send somebody with her to, and then they're the experts. They do this all day. So they know how to go, who to talk to, how to go to get the restraining order. They know about the criminal case. She can have her mail sent there. Every courthouse in the nation has special paperwork you can fill out to waive certain court costs and filing fees if you're in a tough financial situation. Those are called indigency. So if you're indigent, there are ways to kind of waive those fees. Every local jurisdiction has a legal aid organization. Here in Tampa, it's Bay Area Legal, and they provide, if you qualify, so you have to submit your paperwork showing, what your financial situation is. But if you qualify, they will often come alongside a victim and assist with the divorce and with the injunction. And then the criminal case, there's no upfront cost associated with that. The victim is just a witness in the case. But oftentimes a local domestic violence organization will give a victim transportation to those court appearances. Also, every sheriff's office has usually a victim's advocate that works with the sheriff's office that can help the victim navigate the criminal court process. So there's a lot of different opportunities and local organizations that help. It may just be partnering with your local domestic violence organization who can clue you in and key you into all of those different opportunities and how they work and how to qualify. So I would say, just like we don't really do anything alone, and we always have our support network, I wouldn't try to do this alone. I would be reaching out to as many people to help as I can. My church will help out people depending on what their circumstances are. So I'm thinking of someone that I've assisted in my church with her situation. And there's a benevolence fund. Everybody hates domestic violence. It's one of those things that we all feel angry about when we hear that
Absolutely.
usually
Absolutely.
somebody physically more powerful is taken advantage of, but of somebody who is either physically or emotionally weaker. So it makes all of us angry. It's just that oftentimes we don't know how we can help. When you've got a victim who's ready to go, ready to get safe, oftentimes there are people knocking themselves over to help out. It's just a matter of putting it out there. Don't be afraid to ask. We have a really individualistic culture here in America, and a lot of times we are super afraid to put anybody out of their way. But this is something I'm thrilled when a victim calls me and wants help. I can't wait to jump in there and help, because it gives me less of a feeling. It gives me a feeling of hope, that I don't feel hopeless about this, that I feel like there's some small thing that I'm doing to fight back against something that's so evil. So I would say reach out for that help, but there's a lot of assistance out there.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you know so much about this. This is really terrific. And I want to share with everyone again the hotline. So this is the National Domestic Violence Hotline. It's 1-800-799-SAFE, which is 7233. It's 1-800-799-7233. So do not hesitate to call that number, and then someone there will direct you on to exactly what you need to be doing. I also want to share with you that we are part of the divorcecoalition.com. There's a lot of great information on there, so you can check that out, divorcecoalition.com, and see, if there's any information. There's all kinds of shows, and there's articles and need to know information and everything like that. So if you're looking to, the healing process and trying to get through this, that should certainly help you. So divorcecoalition.com. So let's talk a little bit about something. Let's switch the gears just a little bit here on the last part of our show. Now, during COVID, you did something a little bit unique, right? Because we're at home, we can't really do a whole lot. And so you came up with an idea to really share your talents and your knowledge. So share with us what you did during COVID.
I wrote a play. So community theater is something I do as a hobby in my spare time. When I was in the courtroom, I'm not a prosecutor anymore, but when I was, going in front of juries, there's not a lot of difference between going in front of a jury and going in front of an audience sometimes. So it kept me sharp. It let me get out a lot of my creative energy. But then when the pandemic happened, it went away. You couldn't do rehearsal, you couldn't perform. So I started to write, and I took, and the first piece of advice anybody ever gives you is write what you know. And I knew so many stories of what, not just violent incidences, but what led up to it. What were the different ways that violence was subtly and not subtly used as a tool to control, for power and control over victims? So I was like, I can write about that. So I wrote a story about a woman who's in her midlife, and she's a little bit shy and a little bit timid, but she comes in to work on a Saturday, and she encounters two criminals breaking into the office. So then they're trying to keep her there, and they're trying to keep her from interfering, but she's trying to get them to kind of start to fight with each other so she can get away. So I was able to sort of bake in what I learned about how violence works and why it works. And I was able to bake it into the story, but at the same time create sort of a heart pounding drama that was really fun to act in. Because it's also true that in theater, oftentimes the roles that you get as a woman are boring. You're the, happy mom in the background cleaning up or helping everybody talk about their problems, but you're not getting to do anything fun. So once I wrote this, I got my local theater to put it up, and I got to act in it. And so I'm fighting these bad guys, and it was just so much fun. So I sent you a link to the website that I created. You can see a production of the play, so you can actually watch it. You can watch a trailer we shot for it to kind of give you a flavor of what the story's about. But part of what I baked into the story, and you'll see that if you watch the trailer, is that when women encounter violent crime, we start to think about the people that we love, the people that love us. That is what motivates. When a victim leaves, it's because she leaves for her kids to get them safe, or she leaves because her mom wants her back home somewhere safe. So it's because of our loved ones. So you'll see that come through if you click the trailer. The main character is trying to get back to those people that depend on her, that she knows need her. And it just kind of is a way of me to channel what I've learned, but make it ultimately a very hopeful story.
Oh, it sounds so great. So here is the website. So you guys, it's just HTTPS colon and then the slash and it's DURESSPLAY.MY.CANVA.SITE and then the slash. So Duress, it's like Duress Play My Canva site. So just kind of remember that. But, we'll put it on our website. We'll have it in our show notes so that all you have to do is just click on it and watch it. But, it is really cool. I mean, I think it's a cool thing to do. And, during COVID, a lot of us were trying to figure out what to do with our time. So I think it's great that you did something positive and definitely will change and help lives. So thank you for doing that.
It was fun.
Well, we appreciate you. So we're about to really close the show. It's gone by very quickly. So you want to share with us any last words?
Yeah, just basically, we oftentimes can feel powerless when we're in a position where we're victims of domestic violence. It's just so important to know that feelings aren't facts. We may feel powerless, but truly you are not. We are blessed to live in a society where there's a lot out there for people who are in your same position, who are ready to get help, ready to stay safe. And you deserve everybody deserves to feel safe in their own homes at the very least. So if you're in a position where you're in a relationship and you feel unsafe, there's something very wrong with that. And it may be time to get a hold of that support that's out there and get out of that relationship because you deserve better.
Well, thank you so much for joining us here today, Angela Sierra. Her name is spelled, it's Sarabia. So I wanted you guys to know that. And she's in like North Newport Richey area. So if you guys are looking for an attorney, Angela, definitely go to her because she knows her stuff with regards to domestic violence. Again, I want to put up the number for the National Domestic Violence Hotline. That is 1-800-799-7233. Just remember, safe on the end, 1-800-799-7233. And again, I want to share with you, I'm also working with the divorcecoalition.com. And so we've got a lot of really great information on there. If you feel like you're, struggling, you're going through a hard time with regards to abuse, any kind of abuse, just check that out, and maybe that will help you with some great positive information that can maybe lead you through and support you as you continue your journey. So again, it's divorcecoalition.com. So thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. You're listening to WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. This is Going Solo with Cece. I am Cece Shatz. I'm the Doyenne of Relationship Building. You can find all of our information on goingsolonetwork.com. And of course, if you want to email me, my email is goingsolonetwork@gmail.com. I love to get your emails and I read them personally, answer them myself. So please do not hesitate to message me. I would love to hear from you. So we are going to close out the show, but I want to thank you so much. Thank our wonderful guest here today. We just can't appreciate you enough. So take care, everyone. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.